Oh, I'm sorry. Come over here and grab two off my desk. I must have missed you. Okay. So, first thing. So, Annabel Lee is obviously written by Edgar Allan Poe. We talked a little bit about Edgar Allan Poe yesterday. You know a little bit about Edgar Allan Poe based off of your CSI investigation into his death. I found this, picture on Google, and I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And then I was like, wait, I need to fact check, and I did. So, as you know from your investigation into Edgar Allan Poe a couple weeks ago, he was married to a woman named Virginia Clem, who, yes, was his first cousin, which seems crazy to us, but wasn't as crazy in his time. What was a little crazy was the fact that she was 13 and he was 26. That was a little weird. But she ended up dying 11 years into their marriage when she was 24 of tuberculosis. And after she died, Edgar Allan Poe wrote some of his most famous poems, two of which we are going to be reading this week. So the first one that was written after her death was this one, Annabel Lee, that we're going to look at today. The second one that was written in response to her death, allegedly, is The Raven, which we'll read later on this week. A friend of Poe's, Charles Burr, wrote, many times after the death of his beloved wife was he found at the dead hour of a winter night sitting beside her tomb, almost frozen in the snow. He did end up going on to be engaged to another woman, Eliza something, I can't remember her name, but it was never really the same kind of love as Virginia Clem, his cousin. Yeah, his cousin. So, some insight into that before we read Annabel Lee. So, whenever we analyze, we always will first look at the poem for its content, okay? We will look at it for just its intended purpose, entertainment, okay? So, here we go. It was many and many a year ago, in a kingdom by the sea, that a maiden there lived whom you may know by the name of Annabel Lee. And this maiden, she lived with no other thought than to love and be loved by me. I was a child and she was a child in this kingdom by the sea, but we loved with a love that was more than love. I'd really appreciate it if you would stop talking while I'm trying to read this beloved poem. Thank you. But we loved with a love that was more than love, I and my Annabel Lee, with a love that the winged seraphs in heaven coveted her and me. And this was the reason that, long ago, in this kingdom by the sea, a wind blew out of a cloud, chilling my Annabel Lee, so that her high-born kinsman came and bore her away from me, to shut her up in a sepulchre in this kingdom by the sea. The angels, not half so happy in heaven, went envying her and me. Yes, that was the reason, as all men know, in this kingdom by the sea, that the wind came out of the cloud by night, chilling and killing my Annabel Lee. But our love, it was stronger by far than the love of those who were older than we, of many far wiser than we. And neither the angels in heaven above, nor the demons down under the sea, can ever dissever my soul from the soul of the beautiful Annabel Lee. For the moon never beams without bringing me dreams of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And the stars never rise, but I feel the bright eyes of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And so, all the night tide, I lie down by the side of my darling, my life and my bride. In her sepulchre there by the sea, in her tomb by the sounding sea. Somebody raise their hand and tell me what this poem's about. Ashlyn, what's this poem about? Annabel Lee. What happens to Annabel Lee? Somebody raise their hand and tell me. Kaylee. She dies, yeah. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm first going to show you a little bit of a color coding system that is going to be your friend when you get to analyzing The Raven, because The Raven is much longer than this one. So we're going to start with the pink highlighter. And this is how I make a key. You are free to make a key however you want to. But when I make a key, I just do like a line of the color. And then I will get a pen in a color that you can see. and then I will just write in the highlight. So the pink is going to be rhyming words. So throughout this poem, we are going to highlight rhyming words in pink. Once you're finished with the pink line, you can move on to the next color, which would be orange. Orange is unknown words. You're going to highlight words that you don't know in orange. Yellow is figurative language. Green is questions. Blue is things that you find interesting. Purple is for connections. So really these last three, the green, the blue, and the purple, those are the same as our color coding system that we use for annotation. They're no different. It's exactly the same. But, excuse me, but these three are really, well, the orange is for important vocab, so you could say that that's unknown words, but really these three are specific to poetry themselves, okay? Now, I'm not going to be grading you on remembering what the colors mean or anything like that. It's just so that you have something to use when you're looking at the poem so that you can correctly identify these different things, okay? And it's going to make determining internal rhyme and external rhyme a lot easier. Okay. Everybody got this? All right. So we're going to look at this stanza by stanza. What is a stanza? Ashlyn, what's a stanza? A group of lines. Yeah. A group of lines. So this right here is a stanza. This is a stanza, this is a stanza, this is a stanza, this is a stanza, and this is a stanza. Okay? First thing that we're going to look at is called external rhyme. And it's actually a lot easier than you probably will think it is. It is the pattern in which the words rhyme. So, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take our pink highlighter, and we are only looking at this stanza for words that rhyme. Okay? It was many and many a year ago, in a kingdom by the sea, that a maiden there lived whom you may know. Do you have any rhyming words yet? Ago and no. Good. By the name of Annabel Lee. Do you now have another set of rhyming words? See and Lee. And this maiden, she lived with no other thought. Does thought rhyme with anything? No. No other thought than to love and be loved by me. Does me rhyme with anything? Yep. So, here is how you determine external rhyme. You give words letters. So if you're going to go through the alphabet, and each new rhyming word gets a new letter. So, it's always going to start with what letter? A, obviously, right? So the first line is always going to be A. Always. Okay? The first line is always going to be A. Does C rhyme with ago? No. So what letter does C get? Good. Does no rhyme with a go? So what letter does no get? Good. Does Lee rhyme with a go? Does a go? Does Lee rhyme with C? Yes, so what letter does it get? Good. Does thought rhyme with a go? Does thought rhyme with C? So what letter does it get? Good. What about me? What letter does it get? B. So the external rhyme of this poem, of this stanza, is A, B, A, B, C, B. Now, typically, in the perfect world of poetry, which there really is no perfect world of poetry, but every stanza would follow the same rhyme scheme. So it would always go A, B, C, B. Edgar Allan Poe, he doesn't really play by the rules. So each of his poems, or each of his stanzas, I keep saying poems instead of stanzas, each of his stanzas are going to have a different rhyme scheme. But for my purposes, you only have to identify the first rhyme scheme. The first stanza's rhyme scheme, that's it. I don't make you go into detail or anything like that. Okay? Does this make sense? Okay? Okay. So now that we've identified rhyming words, now we're going to take our orange, and we're going to see if there's any words in here that we don't know. Are there any words in the first stanza that you don't know what they mean? There's one word that I identified in here that I didn't know if you would know, but you guys might know as an advanced class. But can anybody pull out the word that I thought maybe you wouldn't know? Dorian? Maiden, yep, that's the one. Okay, so what I'm going to do with unknown words is I'm just going to come out here to the side and make a list with words and their definitions. Does anybody know what maiden means? What's it mean, Dorian? It's actually, no, it's not a wife. It's a unmarried girl. When I thought about a maiden, I also thought I was like, oh, like a wife, somebody's maiden. But actually, if you look it up, the definition, especially in this time period, it means unmarried girl. Okay, now let's use our yellow, and let's look at the things that we're going to be looking for. Repetition and alliteration. Somebody define alliteration for me. Ashlyn? Yes, it's this words that start with the same consonant. If it's a vowel, what's it called? Assonance, good. If it's repetition of a word that starts with a vowel, it's assonance. If it's a repetition of the beginning of a word that starts with a consonant, it's going to be alliteration. Okay? So, do you see any repetition in the first line? Many and many? Do you see any other repetition throughout the rest of the stanza? Okay, we can, yeah. I think you'll have more repetition as we get further throughout the poem. Let's move on to stanza number 2. We're going to start with, anything you find interesting, questions about, or connections. Okay. Let's go back to our pink highlighter. Now we're looking at rhyming words again. I was a child and she was a child. Do child and child rhyme? No. Child and child do not rhyme. They are the same word. Words that are the same do not rhyme. Okay? They are different. Now, if it was a homophone, then it would, but not child and child. In this kingdom by the sea. Does child and sea rhyme? No. But we loved with a love that was more than love. Does love rhyme with child or sea? I and my Annabel Lee rhyme with anything? C and Lee? With a love that the winged seraphs in heaven, does heaven rhyme with any of these words? Coveted her and me. Does me rhyme with anything? Yep. Okay, unknown words. What you got for me? Seraphs, absolutely. Any other ones you don't know? There's another one that I kind of identified that I didn't know if you'd know. Wing just means has wings. I know it's got that tilde above the E. I don't know if it's called a tilde. I just made that up. What's it called? An accent? Yeah. Accent. What's the tilde? The squiggle. Okay. So it's got an accent above the E. What? Oh, good to know. I don't really find myself using those, but, you know, maybe. Any other ones that you think you don't know? Coveted. Coveted. Yep, that's the other one. Okay. Let me define these for you. Now, if you were doing this on your own, you would obviously be looking up the definitions, but because I am so gracious, seraphs are angels, kind of like, you know those little fat babies, like cherubs, you know what I'm talking about? That's kind of what a seraph is, like a little fat baby, like a little Buddha, or, you know, like in, I can't think of any instance, like Cupid. Yeah, like Cupid. Coveted means to hold close. Coveted means to hold close. Now, I don't know about you, but this first line of this stanza I can connect to. Because, what do I know about Edgar Allan Poe and his wife? She was a child. So, I'm going to highlight she was a child. I need your voices down, please. And I'm also going to highlight it in purple because I can connect to that because I already knew that information. But I'm also going to box it in blue because I find it interesting that he is just outright admitting that she was a child. Even if he says that he was a child too. Now, we could interpret this to mean that they've known each other for a long time, that they've grown up together. We could interpret it that way, but again, given what we know about Virginia Clem, find it a little interesting. Now, I'm also going to highlight, I'll wait for you. I'm also going to highlight this line right here because this is one of Edgar Allan Poe's most famous lines from his poem, any of his literary works. What we loved with a love that was more than love is one of his most famous quoted quotations. Okay? So I'm going to highlight that in purple. One of my roommates from college also has that tattooed on her, so I can also connect to it that way. Now, do you see any repetition from the first stanza now to this stanza? Is there any lines that are repeated? What is it? In a kingdom by the sea. What other name has been repeated? Good. Anything else in here that you have questions about or you find interesting or you can connect to? Okay, let's move on. Again, I will wait for you. third stanza. And this was the reason that long ago, in this kingdom by the sea, well, there's repetition again, so I'm going to highlight that. A wind blew out of a cloud, chilling my beautiful Annabel Lee. That's another repetition. So that her highborn kinsman came and bore her away from me, to shut her up in a sepulchre, I can't say that word, sepulchre, in this kingdom by the sea. So I'm highlighting these things because they are repetition. They've been repeated throughout the first two stanzas and now into the third. Gunnar. What about it? Yes, you can absolutely call it that, yes. You could absolutely call it that. Okay, let's go back to our rhyming. What stands out to you as rhyming in this stanza? See, Lee, me, see. Does a go, chilling, came, sepulchre rhyme? No. Okay, give me words you don't know. Yep. What else? Kinsman? Any other ones? Four? Okay, so let's start with sepulchre. And I know that I'm not saying it correctly. I've listened to Google say it to me like 18 million times, and my mouth just cannot form the word. So if you want to hear how it's really pronounced, you can Google it. But a sepulchre means a tomb. It looks a lot like this. It's not like a regular casket or coffin. It's like a cement structure that's usually above ground. It's not buried, it's above ground, so it's kind of something like this that just sits on the ground and stands kind of as a monument. Kinsman is family. If you look at the root word of kinsman, kin, your kin is your family, who you're related to blood-wise. And bore, in this context, means took. Now, if you look at, I've now read this poem 3 times 3, so 9. This is my 10th time reading this poem. And it occurred to me just this time that we were reading it, that he's saying that the reason that she died is because of their love. So it just now occurred to me that that was the reason. But he also does something with the wind. A wind blew out of the cloud, chilling. Can we call that personification? I'm asking you. There's no right or wrong answer. I'm just asking you. Yes? Okay. That's what I'm kind of thinking too, that we could call it personification because maybe not so much in this sentence, but we're saying that the wind ends up killing her. So I'm wondering if that's maybe personification there. I think we can look at it that way. I think it just kind of depends on how we look at the wind, and if we're looking at it as if it has a reason or an ulterior motive, I think you can look at it that way. Or we can just look at it as she kind of caught a cold from the wind. It's kind of dependent upon how you want to look at it. Okay, anything in here that you find interesting, you have questions about, or you can connect to? Okay, next stanza. The angels not half so happy in heaven. Do you see anything there? Any sort of figurative language? Alliteration. Half so happy in heaven. As you know, I'm not going to talk over you, so you're going to have to turn your voices off. The angels not half so happy in heaven went envying her and me. Yes, that was the reason, as all men know, in this kingdom by the sea. That's a repeated phrase. That the wind came out of the cloud by night, chilling and killing my Annabel Lee. So again, if you look at it, it's kind of dependent upon how you look at it. I look at it as the wind had an ulterior motive. The wind killed her because of their love. But if you don't look at it that way, you obviously don't see that as personification. This is a 100% subjective process. There is no right or wrong way to annotate a poem, to analyze a poem, or anything like that. I don't know what Edgar Allan Poe meant. But as I read it, I do kind of see that ulterior motive. He's saying that the wind went out of its way to kill her. But again, you may not see it that way. It's subjective. It's completely up to you. Okay? I am going to go ahead and highlight chilling and killing, and I'm going to write out personification. If you don't see that, don't do it. But if you do see it that way, then you can write it down. Okay, let's look at rhyming words. Does heaven rhyme with anything? No. Heaven, me, no, see, night, leave. No. Does me rhyme with anything? Yes. Me, see, lee. No, night. No, doesn't rhyme. Any words in there you don't know? Envying? Envying, or envy, is jealousy. But our love, it was stronger by far than the love of those who were older than we. I'm going to highlight that in blue because I find that interesting. Older than we. We're admitting it now. Many far wiser than we. Do we and we rhyme? No, we and we do not rhyme. They are just the same word. Unless it was a homophone, it doesn't rhyme. And neither the angels in heaven above, nor the demons down under the sea, can ever dissever my soul from the soul of my beautiful Annabel Lee. I'm going to highlight Annabel Lee in yellow because that's a repetition. Oh, you're right. We did miss that in the first stanza, or in the previous stanza. You're right. Annabel Lee. Soul from the soul. Repetition there. Oh, I see. Okay, we're switching over to our pink highlighter. Love rhymes with above. We rhymes with see and lee. What about ever dissever? Can that rhyme? It can, yeah. Because those are technically two different words. They just end with the same thing. Chilling and killing, yeah, in the previous stanza, you're right. That's an example of consonants right there. words in here you don't know? Anything you find interesting, you have questions about, anything like that? Anything you can connect to? Okay. Let's move on to the last stanza. The last stanza of this poem is my favorite stanza because it's a great example of internal rhyme. We've talked about external rhyme. Now I'm going to show you internal rhyme. It says, "For the moon never beams without bringing me dreams." What lines in their rhyme? Beams and dreams. Of the beautiful Annabel Lee. I'm going to switch over to my yellow highlighter to highlight Annabel Lee again. And the stars never rise but I feel the bright eyes of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And so all the night tide, I lie down by the side of my darling, my life and my bride. In her sepulchre there by the sea, in her tomb by the sounding sea. So this is an example of internal rhyme. External rhyme is the rhyming with the whole stanza. Internal rhyme is rhyming within the same line. So this stanza is the only one that represents a true internal rhyme. This one, you could argue that this line has internal rhyme there, but I kind of think that's a little bit of an accident. Not an accident, but I think that this is a much better representation of internal rhyme. Jessina. Yes, you're right, we didn't do that. So Lee and C. Anything that you can connect to in here? That's an awesome, yeah. I'm going to do this line right here. Charles Burr. Any words you don't know? Other than sepulchre, but we already defined that. We could highlight that in orange if we wanted to. Any other figurative language? Maybe in the first line? Where do you get your dreams from? Your brain, right? Okay, or heaven, sure. Technically, it would come from your brain. Can the moon bring you dreams? No, but that's an example of personification. analyzing paper. Okay, the reason that we are doing, I'll wait. The reason we are doing this paper is to better understand the poem. You are not going to be asked to do this on your quiz or anything like that. It's just so that we can get a better understanding of our knowledge of the poem and how poetry uses different aspects. Because again, you might see this on NWEA, you might see this on that big fancy test at the end of the year. Okay? So, the first line here is probably all we'll have time for. This is just for us to clarify our knowledge of the poem. So the first line, what is the purpose of this poem? Raise your hand if you can tell me. What's the purpose of this poem? Why did Edgar Allan Poe write it, Dorian? To grieve Annabel Lee. Who do you think this poem was written for? Annabel Lee? Who else could we maybe make the assumption that this poem was written for? Virginia Clem. If you had to give me a summary of this poem, what's this poem about? Like you gave me after we started reading it, or after we read it. Okay, so two people are in love. Then Annabel Lee dies. What happens after she dies? Okay, so the speaker visits her tomb by the sea. Who's the speaker? Yes. There's one big thing to remember here. The speaker is not the author. In poetry, the speaker is said to be different than the author. It's another person speaking this about the subject of the poem. Okay? Okay, we're going to stop here. We'll finish this tomorrow, read the Raven tomorrow. I need all of the highlighters put up and your areas all cleaned up. Please don't leave highlighters on my floor.